So let's switch to this side of the Atlantic. And indeed, the picture in Belgium is not that much different. Indeed, Belgium too has recovered relatively well from the financial crisis. Belgium is famous for allegedly having no government, but has been governed famously. Belgium ran a terrific presidency of the EU. Its 2011 budget was adopted quickly and far exceeds the requirements of the EU. It has the financial ability to adopt a meaningful 2012 budget. Its projected growth for the next year is among the highest in Europe. It has maintained an important, steadfast role in Afghanistan, in support of the NATO mission and in support of President Obama. It's responded to the threats posed by Iran by closing Belgium's all-important ports to sanctioned Iranian shippers, and Belgium took a leadership role in Libya. The Belgian government is fully open for business, and indeed, none of those stellar results is surprising to me in the least. The supposed, quote, caretaker government is composed of experienced leadership. So by all objective measures, other than politics, the future for Belgium shines brightly, while storm clouds hang over many of the other countries in Europe. And yet, for all its clear and demonstrable success, Belgium too finds itself far too close to the edge than it otherwise should be. Just as in the United States, politics in Belgium seems to create doubt where economics and experience should eliminate any doubt. And for me, despite being here for more than 2 years, despite well understanding the controversy between the North and the South, the issues of economics, of language, and of history, the political hurdles that have been erected to greater prosperity in Belgium are even somewhat more mystifying and more difficult to understand and accept than they are for me in the US. You see, to me as an outsider looking in, as a veteran of the US political world, Belgium, in fact, is one of the most politically unified countries on the planet. Now that has to sound so outstanding that I better repeat it just so you can be sure that I did not in fact misspeak. To me, Belgium is one of the most politically unified countries on the planet. You see, most countries have significant substantive policy disagreements among their political parties. In other countries, parties disagree over climate, over the very belief in the science of climate, over the need to cut the carbon footprint. In other countries, parties disagree over health care, whether all citizens should be covered or whether we should tolerate 40 million uninsured. Parties disagree over foreign policy and over the importance of the transatlantic relationship and of trade. Parties disagree over abortion and a woman's rights to choose, over debt ceilings. The gap, for example, in the United States between the Tea Party on the right and the Liberal Democrats on the left is indeed quite large. It's an immense gap between our Tea Party and our Liberal Democrats. But no such fundamental disagreements exist between any Belgian parties. If the political gap in the US were a football goal, the gap in Belgium would span only the left goalpost. Like the US, Belgium too has the luxury to some extent of tolerating more controversy and more economic doubt as a product of the inefficiency of democracy. You see, when all agree on health care, on climate, on the importance of the transatlantic relationship, and on so much more of the fundamental issues, then even the difference between building a bridge or a tunnel can divide an informed and active political electorate. You might be thinking to yourself now, Mr. Ambassador, we've sat for a while in this audience, and this has to be one of the most depressing speeches ever delivered. Shouldn't we feel depressed about, or perhaps even scorn, for two countries who allow politics to invade prosperity at a time when we need government to be efficient and to solve our problems? And I say to you, not at all. I assure you that I too can feel frustrated. But I see the inefficiency of democracy being expressed in Belgium and the United States as a tribute to freedom to be displayed proudly, not as a source of shame to be hidden. If we got rid of that inefficiency of democracy, if we got rid of contested politics, if we got rid of party splits, if we were to force one side or the other to just go along in the name of economic efficiency, whom would we silence? The left or the right? The question shows that the price we've paid for the inefficiency of democracy is well worth the return. Haven't we both already prospered? Indeed, haven't both the United States and Belgium already won by having the freedom to opt for democracy over complete efficiency? Haven't we seen so many others opt to pay much higher prices in places like Tunisia, Syria, Yemen, and Libya? And indeed, wouldn't the planet itself be so much more secure and prosperous if the political inefficiency of democracy were to reign in places like Iran or North Korea? Indeed, the democracy glasses in the United States and Belgium remain more than half full, not half empty at all. Now, it does appear that Belgium is nearing the end of its political turmoil, while politics will likely remain on center stage in the United States for most of the next year. In fact, Election Day is a year from yesterday. So can Belgium help the United States? Can Belgium help President Obama fill our glass up while politics continues to make it difficult for the United States to do it itself? Which brings us to that third set of lessons for the 21st century, the lessons about the Belgian-American relationship. The lessons about the Belgian-American relationship start with substance and policy. I think I know Barack Obama's position on every major issue of the day. I've read every speech he's delivered. I read every one of the White House press releases, about 12 a day. And I think I know Belgium's position on every major issue as well. And I can report loudly and clearly that President Obama and Belgium agree on every leading substantive issue that affects our world today. And that statement, that we agree on every leading substantive issue, would remain true under a Leterme government or under a new Belgian government, whether it's led by Mr. De Rupo or another person. Belgium and the United States under President Obama, Belgium and the United States agree on every major substantive issue of our day. On climate, we both believe to our cores that we need to save our planet from the threat of carbon. We need to get all the leading carbon producers in the next 50 years finally to work together to overcome the challenge we face. On global security issues, we both believe that Iran and Mahmoud Ahmadinejad today present a threat to us all and must be met by a vigilant coalition of the Brotherhood of Man. We need to close our ports and our trade until Iran opens its eyes to a peaceful and secure planet. We both applaud President Obama's decision to keep his word on the timeline for responsibly removing U.S. troops from Iraq. On Afghanistan, we both remain concerned about the dangers that we face every day and that still lie ahead. But together we celebrate the huge strides that have been made in Afghanistan to reduce terrorist training, to restore order, and to rebuild fundamental civil society, including the fact that 7 million Afghani children now attend school when less than 1 million previously did so. We both agree in Afghanistan that we need to scale down our troop commitment starting in 2012, but that none should simply rush to the door. We recognize that the U.S. will be the last to depart in 2014, but that the NATO allies, including Belgium, should help right up to that point in getting ready to do so. On the Mideast, we both believe that we need to achieve a two-state solution in which Israeli mothers and Palestinian mothers can live in security and peace, focusing more on their children's college careers than on the violence that may confront them one day. And we both believe there's no alternative to negotiations, that the parties must resolve their disputes at a table together. That as well-meaning third parties, we, Belgium and the United States, must always focus on the strategic goal of achieving this negotiated two-state solution, and together we should try to oppose either party's effort to engage in games of tactical warfare, whether that consists of UN settlements, or whether that consists of UN votes or increased settlements that simply make a long-term strategic negotiated agreement one step further out of reach. So with my president and the country in which I represent him agreeing on every substantive issue, I work daily urging Belgium to help lead in the formation of a European consensus. I therefore see Belgium as a critical link in bringing the US and Europe together on our joint pursuit of our joint goals, in helping to build a consensus on climate, on Afghanistan, on economic recovery, on the Middle East. You see, Belgium is in the ideal position to lead in forming that consensus. Now, of course, I know that there are other bigger countries. I know that there are richer countries. But to me, Belgium leads in credibility. Belgium does not talk often, and it never shouts. When Belgium does talk, it does so for only one reason. It has something to say. So when Belgium talks, others do take note. Germany, for example, can differ with France, or Europe North with Europe South, but Belgium often speaks to and for all. Belgium's credibility can lead to a European consensus, and when you're America looking at your allies, the consensus builder remains potentially your most important partner. How do you think Herman Van Rompuy has remained endorsed by all of Europe in a period of its greatest turmoil? And Belgium has led in the past. Belgium was one of the leaders in Europe expressing the opposition to the war in Iraq. Indeed, a Belgian foreign minister and a Belgian defense minister, who's now a good friend, a former defense minister, once argued fervently to ban US military from shipping any items through the port of Antwerp, or even being allowed to cross over Belgian airspace. Now, if Belgium could lead in Europe in expressing the opposition to the United States when our policies so disagreed with one another, Belgium can and should again lead in Europe when Belgium's, Europe's, and the United States' policy dovetail as closely as they do today. And in fact, when Libya arose, it was Belgian credibility that helped shape the NATO alliance and do the right thing in Libya, as America simply needed to participate as but one partner. Libya proved to be a success for Belgians, for Americans, and most importantly, for the Libyan people. Now, that period under President Bush, when the threats existed to ban our military overflights or shipments through Afghanistan, that period was a low point for the Belgian-American relationship. Given our policies, the US policies on Iraq, on climate and Kyoto, on mistreatment in Guantanamo, cynicism about the United States was prevalent in Europe and in Belgium for most of that decade. Thankfully, as we look to the lessons of the 21st century, I can report that the Belgian-American relationship is flourishing once again. Boston Red Sox t-shirts are proudly being worn and greeted once again in the Grand Place, and American guidebooks to Belgium again are being carried with their cover face up. The weekly magazine in Le Soir has recently run an article that included in its title that Belgium, quote, was loving America again, close quote. A Belgian newspaper last year called me, quote, the most popular ambassador ever in Belgium, clearly a tribute not to me, but to the president for whom I serve and the policies in which he believes. I was delighted to have been chosen last January to present the final award at the Music Industry Awards to Stromae for a Lauren Dance. On September 11th, our September 11th ceremony had the best turnout in Europe, both in terms of numbers of citizens and number of leading government officials, and it was covered live on Belgian television throughout the day, the only country in Europe to do so. Indeed, one of the 317 cities that I visited so far, the city of Bougounat, erected a monument marking the visit. Please tell your local mayors that as I travel around the country, monuments are well appreciated. Now, I said that to one mayor at a party hoping to share a chuckle. I said it to one mayor at a party hoping to share a chuckle, and he responded that a monument might be too expensive for the city, but perhaps they could name a street for me. Tell your mayors that street namings also are greatly appreciated if budget problems exist. As well, the cynicism about U.S. policy has, for the most part, been replaced by mutual respect and even mutual admiration. We are almost fully there. And yet there's still so much more to do, and I need to get better in doing it. Transparency, communication, and candor with all of Belgium about the policies and beliefs of President Obama and the United States remain the key. I find that when Belgians understand the thinking behind the U.S. policies, we almost always can get to yes. I know Belgians are careful listeners. I know they're fair and indeed often give me and my president more than the benefit of the doubt. So if my country's case is just, as I believe it's always been under President Obama, then if I do my job of explaining and communicating our case to the citizens of Belgium, we cannot help but stand side by side on nearly every issue. But it does not always happen, and inevitably, the failure is mine. Failures that I believe are less of policy and more of failures of communication and diplomacy by my embassy and me. We experienced one such failure as recently as last week on the vote to whether to admit the Palestinians to UNESCO. You see, President Obama and I have long believed to our core that long-term peace in the Middle East could only be approached by following strategy over tactics, by consistently showing Israelis and Palestinians alike that there's no way to end run around true negotiations and a negotiated peace agreement. Tactics aimed at short-term advances could only lead to tactical short-term counter-responses and would merely allow the Middle East to deteriorate further into tactical warfare rather than pursue negotiations. Supporting tactical efforts that will be met by tactical reprisals is a step in the wrong direction. What's more, President Obama and I believed in the value of UNESCO and of other subsidiary UN organizations. But laws that were passed in the United States in 1990 and 1993 meant that if UNESCO or any UN organization admitted the Palestinians prior to a real negotiated agreement on statehood, the U.S. was obligated to cut its funding to that organization. With that law on the U.S. books since 1993, we simply had no choice about continuing funding. And with our legislature split today and the structure of our political system, there is no way for this administration to get that law revised. Now, we are all frustrated by the lack of progress in the Middle East and by the continued settlement efforts by Israel. So we needed to press harder to resume the negotiations. We needed to press harder to stop the settlements. But that frustration has understandably led to Palestinians pursuing short-term tactical victories. We needed desperately to prevent the international focus from shifting to tactical efforts aimed at short-term advantages that would simply be met by tactical reprisals and send peace one step further away. So when the Palestinians sought admission to UNESCO, a body focusing largely on culture and the arts and education, we, the U.S., needed our allies to form one voice next to us or in front of us, and to say that such tactical efforts would hinder the efforts at a true and strategic negotiated peace. And with President Obama wanting desperately to continuing funding the good works at UNESCO, but with his hands tied by the laws of 1990 and 93, we needed our allies last week to form one voice, urging that voting in favor of UNESCO admission would be counterproductive to UNESCO and to the efforts of a well-meaning president to work in the right and constructive direction for that organization. Now, I wasn't foolish. There was much reason to understand why Belgium would traditionally abstain on such issues. I was hoping that perhaps on this one, Belgium might be able to help lead that formation of the consensus, the formation of the chorus in Europe, supporting the United States vote against UNESCO membership for the Palestinians in the long-term interest of the Palestinians, of peace, of security in the Middle East, and of UNESCO. Now, that chorus of allies did form, of countries standing with the United States in these efforts. It wasn't just Canada and Australia, but in Europe it included Germany and the Netherlands, Sweden and the Czech Republic, all voting with the United States against. With that lineup, I would have hoped for Belgium to join, to literally stand next to Germany and the Netherlands as it does every day, and help lead and build that chorus on the no vote. Or I would have fully hoped that if standing with Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, Canada, Australia, and some others that day was a stretch too far, a bit too hard, then Belgium would simply join the UK, Italy, Denmark, Switzerland, Portugal, Poland, Slovakia, and many others in abstaining. But on that day, to my great disappointment, for reasons I understand and respect, but respectfully disagree with, Belgium voted yes, and the UNESCO efforts passed. Not to abstain, not against. It's an experience to learn and to build on as we move forward, as Belgium and the United States build into the 21st century together. For me, it's a symbol to work harder, to stay transparent, to communicate better. See, the challenges that we faced will continue to unite us more than any disagreements that we have could possibly divide us. We will build that 21st century together, and I look forward to building it with each of you. Thanks so much, and all the best.